So that's me, you know who I am now. So, like all of the ViPP IAPT programs now, it's a 2-year part-time structure, that's right?
Yep.
So we're planning to start in January. So the idea with going to part-time was based quite a lot on feedback from previous trainees and making it a kind of a helpful and an easier experience for them to integrate with their work. So the plans would be within term time that trainees would be in teaching 1 day a week. The 0 to 5 course is a Anna Freud UCL course, so it would be based at Anna Freud. And that then the trainee has protected clinical time for an additional day. The core skills and the 0 to 5 specific curriculum are integrated, so it's not sequential, they are woven in with each other throughout. And at the end you get a postgraduate diploma apprenticeship from UCL. So, the curriculum itself. So, as I said, core skills is integrated, but also it's not separated in the same way as it has been previously for those that have completed it. So what we're able to do is make it quite infant mental health specific. And some of the stuff that I've put up there in terms of the content is the kind of the standard stuff, but we'll also be able to integrate some of the infant mental health stuff, so things like parental mental illness and child development specific to babies and toddlers will be able to go in there as well, which is really helpful. And then the things that are perhaps not so relevant to younger children, kind of trainees won't have to go through. There will still be some core skills that we've done as a whole group for everybody, but there's actually not that much in the curriculum now. And core skills will still have its separate assessment process. So there'll be case studies and whole session recordings just as there was before. It's still a 60 credit module. So, the 0 to 5s module is quite unique to any of the other ones. I know a couple of you said that you've done some previous ones. Because it is encompassing more than one intervention, and it's encompassing all of these presentations opposed to one specific presentation, which is a challenge, but it also makes it fun to do. So the presentations that people definitely, so conduct problems and the attachment or pre-attachment, everybody does in their clinical work. So conduct problems for under 5s, as you know, are some of these things, like excessive crying, persistent defiance, screaming, etc. And then what the curriculum states is that everybody learns about all of them, but then they have to do either the regulatory difficulties or social and emotional difficulties in their caseload. So everyone would learn about all of them, but they wouldn't have to illustrate that they had worked with all of them within their assessed caseload, if that makes sense. Any thoughts about how this has been separated and kind of conceptualised? Yeah?
I guess I was just, how the attachment problems are separated from the symptoms of the attachment problems.
Yeah. So I think what will slightly make sense of that is how the module is kind of structured is to have these 3 sub-modules that people go through. And quite a lot of the fundamental principles we're able to put into core skills, which is really helpful for the time. So that's kind of the typical and atypical development, but also the kind of assessment, engagement, formulation stuff as well, but specifically to that age group. So what you've got then for the subsequent 2 sub-modules is interventions to support attachment using video feedback. So this is thinking about 0 to 5, so the whole age range, and it's thinking about a video feedback approach. So I think partly that decision about where people fit will be based on how old they are, because for the other difficulties, these top 3, they're really fitting into the third sub-module, which would be from kind of 18 months upwards, in terms of their how they fit from their presentation and how the curriculum kind of defines them. So it will be, if they're over 18 months, it will be whether their parents are better suited to a video feedback intervention or to a parenting programme. So you've got your fundamental principles, and then you've got these 2 interventions. And the way the curriculum is written is that it is exactly these words. So interventions to support attachment using video feedback techniques. As London and the South East, we've decided that we want to train people up in ViPP, which is video feedback for positive parenting, and for those above 18 months, the sensitive discipline bit as well. I imagine there'll be other areas that would do VIG, and I can come on to talk about why we chose ViPP and why we think that's the best intervention. And so for the interventions for existing diagnosable problems, these aren't catchy titles, we have decided, so how the curriculum is written again is about a behavioural parenting programme really, and so we've decided that we are going to train people on incredible years for toddlers and preschool, and do some kind of individual parent training, because as you'll know, those are group programmes.
Will you also be doing training in the babies incredible years?
Well, the babies incredible years is really for younger children, and so how it's written is that for the parenting interventions, it's for for 18 months upwards. So no.
So I'm just thinking about parents' choice. If they don't think it's too invasive to have the parent with video feedback, they might prefer a parenting group.
I guess that's hardly possible, and I think we can possibly see how we go. In fact, even the toddler and preschool are separate training, so to train people on 3, and they've got different number of sessions and different manuals, so to train people on 3 separate programmes I think would be hugely challenging in the time we have.
For babies is only an extra day, if you've done the core years training.
I guess we'd have to think about people's caseloads as well, and at the moment the curriculum is written in that we're focusing on 18 months plus. It's certainly something we could hold in mind to see how we go, but I think we're in this position, as I said, with 0 to 5s, where we've got numerous presentations and numerous interventions, whereas most modules have, the one. And I think that's, it fits the kind of eclectic and complex families that perhaps you see in reality, but I think we have to have some kind of boundaries about how much we can fit in. But certainly something to think about.
Excuse me, and is the incredible years, is it actually a bit one for the children, or are you just talking about parent training for toddler age?
Sorry, I didn't hear.
The incredible years is a toddler preschool manual with working with the children, with puppets and their emotion regulation.
Yeah.
And is that what you mean by the incredible years, or are you thinking about offering the parent training?
It's the basic parent
It's the
training.
parent training.
Yeah.
For toddlers, okay.
And what we've tried to do with the incredible years in terms of the curriculum is kind of set people up so that services are aware of how they could then perhaps develop those afterwards, so that they could go on and do other bits of that training to support it as well, and link in with the kind of incredible years mentors. But yeah, we've only got so much time we're able to kind of fit in. So the assessment again is case reports, clinical log, tapes of sessions that kind of cover all the different interventions and presentations as best we can within the time. So have people heard about this? Kind of, were people aware? Is this new news? And do people have, we've obviously made this decision around ViPP and incredible years, and I can talk a bit about why we've made those decisions, but are people kind of surprised or interested in those decisions?
That was interesting.
I was wondering, sorry, I haven't got much of a voice today, but I was wondering about why VIP and why ViPP.
Okay. I think that's, this is just something, I'll come back to that. So for people that perhaps aren't so familiar on the VIP versus VIG conundrums, VIP is a programme that was developed in the Netherlands by Leiden University, initially for families where there were adoption children, so it was a kind of standard rollout across the country for adopted infants. And then kind of later in the process it was adapted to include a sensitive discipline kind of component for children that are above 18 months. It's a home visiting programme, 6 sessions. The first 4 are delivered fortnightly, and then the last 2 are kind of consolidations in there once a month. So the whole programme takes about 16 weeks. It's strengths-based and underpinned by attachment theory, kind of encouraging sensitive interaction, with coercion theory, which is really around that sensitive discipline, kind of consistency that you can build around that. And it includes quite a bit of psychoeducation around child development. So one of the differences with VIG, and I'm happy for VIG people or VIP people to kind of give their experiences. So my understanding of it is, firstly, that it's manualised. So there are certain themes of things that you talk about on each session, and then you, on the whole, film slightly shorter bits, but when you're doing the feedback, you would show them the whole film, and you would stop around every 30 seconds.
Is this a bit?
Yes. With a kind of a message that you want to portray to the family that's in line with the aims of that particular session. And there are some corrective messages within that. So the psychoeducation on child development stuff kind of comes in to help people think about, because what you can see if you're being completely strengths focused is an increase in sensitivity, but not necessarily a decrease in some of that intrusive stuff. And so the child behaviour doesn't necessarily change, although you do see this great increase in the kind of parent-infant interaction, without some of those corrective messages around discipline and how to do that in a sensitive, consistent way, and how you can correct it, then that's a bit trickier. My understanding of VIG is that you're choosing particularly attuned moments and then doing micro-analysis of those moments as opposed to showing the whole thing, and that there's more flexibility in what you would film and how you would do that filming and the messages you give back. VIP chooses, these are some families I've worked with using VIP. So VIP chooses real life scenarios that try to make them real for families, but they are kind of set. There's a mealtime session where you would do a mealtime together, and then there are particular messages. The toys that you use are kind of consistent throughout the families. The kind of games you play, this kind of thing. And I guess you could argue that lends itself to research in a different way, but certainly there's been a whole host of RCTs around the world, both pragmatic and more researchy, that show its kind of effectiveness. So the things that, the short-term nature, its manualisation, how the training is set out, the really strong evidence base are all of the reasons that we chose VIP over VIG. And we'll come on to talk about the EIF a bit later, but the EIF didn't include VIG in its recent review of interventions because it wasn't, when I did specifically go in and speak to them about the VIG versus VIP kind of context, and they just said that it wasn't considered an evidence-based programme, it was something that came out of clinical practice. Not that it wouldn't necessarily get the good evidence, but it's never been done, and so we just don't know. and there is no manual. I'm actually involved in a completely separate hat on how to condense VIG and make it, think about it like that. But at the moment, VIG is really by far got the strongest evidence base.
This is just what I've heard, and this is not that it's very time consuming out of the clinical room, and I don't know if that's just a sort of fear-mongering thing that's being spread, but that's just...
I can tell you about my experience with that, and Rachel, who's over here, is leading on the VIP part of our this kind of modules training, so I was able to give her experience, and she's a trainer as well. So in my experience, I think when you met, and I've been involved in training myself, but also in training a range of professionals, so kind of from health visitors to experienced therapists. I think everybody can come with an anxiety about doing any video feedback work, whatever the kind of modality and the kind of nature of how long that can take. And I think when you get used to it and you're training it can take a little while. But once you kind of get up and running with anything, so if you think about, I don't know, perhaps what your experience is of running a group when you're a trainee, you spend a lot of time kind of preparing and getting ready and thinking about it, and then as you get more experience, it becomes, not that you're not preparing, but that it becomes a bit more straightforward. So I think once you get into it, and because it's manualised, you're also looking at similar things. You know your themes that you're pulling out, you know your messages. It becomes more straightforward. So you have a kind of script, which I think is possibly what you're referring to in terms of what might take a bit of time. So you're having to look at the whole video that you've recorded. You can make that short. It doesn't need to be 20 minutes. You're talking about a few minutes, and you're preparing your script and you're talking for the child in that script. So I would say that is a little bit of an anxiety at the beginning. Don't know what you think, Rachel.
I think I completely agree with this type of student. It's a little bit of, at first particularly, it's a bit like describing an audio tape. It takes a very long time, you repeat it, you go over it, and the very subtle cues that you tune into are really important to share. So it takes you a while to learn how to do that. And so at first, it does take a lot of time. But it does get a lot quicker, and there are other things that you start to notice in a different way. So as people see more and more families that get a lot quicker and learn very quickly to stick to the manual and not let the tape run on, even if it's a beautiful moment. Because the more time, if you for example, there's a reading the book exercise, and if you wait until you've completed the book and it's gone for 8 minutes, you're thinking, I've got to code all of this, so you freeze and stop at a particular time. You just learn waste time.
I know that your grade 11 team have done some bit of training. Do you have any feedback that's in your mind about their experience?
Not specifically, because I've been away and I've only just come back into the service, so I don't know what their experience has been. We've got one person in our team, the Vibes team, that's doing it with them, so they're sharing some vision. But yeah, I haven't got anything on top of that to share.
I think probably one of the most challenging things is about the infrastructure support around getting the recordings time coded, which is a real challenge, and that's something that would need to be thought about for the services, about what your infrastructure support is, and also being able to then play it back to families in a way that is suitable to their TV system. So you didn't deliver it at home, so whether it's on a CD or however you show it, and that is also something that new trainees find very stressful at first, and can be quite time consuming. So
I think this is a true challenge of both all video feedback approaches, and particularly when they're home-based. But I think that how they have kind of increased in popularity and implementation, we're seeing a lot more understanding of how to set that up. So it's certainly something services need to think about, but I think we have kind of support available for their clinical governance and the kind of Caldecott stuff as well as the practical, what kind of, in fact, iPads are often very useful. The problem with some of this video stuff is a couple of years ago we had like, this is the best video recorder, and things change so quickly and things get decommissioned that actually you have to kind of just roll with it a bit. But we can certainly give support for services to set that up, but it can be a bit of work right at the beginning. Sorry, you have been trying to talk for a while.
If you're using VIP, it's a 16 session program.
Six.
Oh, that's enough.
Yeah.
I was thinking the whole 16 session was 6.
Yes. So these are some of the things around sensitive discipline, and how to encourage that, and how you kind of. So for each session, there's a kind of a theme around a sensitivity, and then there's a kind of discipline theme that you're bringing out, and you kind of go through these things and practice them, and try and pull them out in the situations that you're recording and the feedback that you're giving, and how they might fit with the child in their developmental stage. So as I said, this is just for the slightly older children, so you wouldn't do discipline obviously with babies. So there have been a number of adaptations for different populations. One of the ones that we're particularly interested in including in our training is the kind of co-parenting adaptation. So having both parents involved in the filming, kind of encouraging father engagement and that father-infant interaction as well as mum. I was involved in this co-parenting adaptation and it's trialling, and yeah, it was very successful. I guess one of the big things that's tricky with engaging dads in this kind of work across the kind of piece is around when, and so we did quite a lot of our work and flexibly coming to a place that suited them, perhaps doing some early evening or weekend work as well. Any other VIP questions?
Is there any exclusion criteria?
For VIP?
To be able to come in with ASD or...
So, at the moment, sorry about that accent, there is an ASD adaptation to VIP. I'm not, at the moment the curriculum isn't inclusive of that. There is a separate kind of CYP IAPT curriculum that is focusing on children with ASD and learning difficulties. I'm not sure exactly what the content of that curriculum is. I wasn't part of its development. I'm not sure what interventions they're particularly using. I don't think it is part of it as far as I'm aware. But of course there is overlap, and often, sometimes camps wouldn't accept those. There's kind of a specialist team. So at the moment, my plan isn't to include that ASD adaptation. I think it would be really useful to see how we could, perhaps share some of the learning with the other curriculum group as things go forward. But yeah, at the moment, that isn't one of the presentations that we're focusing on. Yeah.
Can I just ask, is the 6 sessions rigid? I mean, if the family need more input at the end of the 6 sessions?
So one of the things that we're going to have, in addition to the kind of core VIP training, we're going to have kind of additional teaching sessions, which is going to be around meeting specific family needs. So we're really interested in translating this kind of manualised programme into a real life setting. So absolutely. But I guess it's how we do that and what we do and what that looks like that we would need to kind of figure out. So co-parenting you could include in the last couple of sessions. That's how we did it in the adaptation, the consolidation sessions. But they could be additional. But it may be that somebody does VIP and then goes on to do incredible years or something like that.
Although in the NICE guidance it does talk about offering up to 10. There's some studies that have shown using more and having additional booster sessions is beneficial to families. But also we've been using it with, we've been doing a study around using it with adopted families, and where the other parent, so using it as, say, for example, a mother and one of the adopted children, and then the father has also requested the intervention with the second adopted child. So actually there's a way of being able to support, a long-term intervention that's true to the model.
We kind of want to be flexible with that, being interested in what the core evidence base is, but also being real to the reality of families that we're working with. So our other programme that we're training people on is Incredible Years. So this is a group programme. I guess one of the really key things is that it's a co-facilitated programme. So ideally what we need is services to provide 2 students to train on the kind of 0 to 5 curriculum, or pair up with another service where you're able to do that together. And we have been doing that pairing up between services for our parent training module that we have, that also incorporates Incredible Years for older children. So that's a possibility, but I think it's really important to bear in mind the co-facilitation. So we're doing toddler and preschool. As I said, the parent training sub-module is been designed and written for 18 months plus, which is why we've made that decision. So the toddler group is 30 weekly sessions, and the preschool basic is similar to the one that would get done in the parent training, so 14 to 18 weekly sessions. This is kind of some of the content of what goes on. I think, are many people doing Incredible Years in their work at the moment? Yeah, so I think there's a bit of a misnomer perhaps that it's very behavioural, and there's actually quite a lot of content in it around the parent-infant interaction as well, and about building that sensitivity and how that relates to behaviour. So I think it really does incorporate that side of things as well. So parents learn strategies for interacting and communicating with their children, and it's quite an interactive course. There's lots of videos and discussions and this kind of thing. It's quite goal focused.
It kind of went out of fashion about 10 years ago. In the local children's centres
I'm not known for being up to date.
in Lambeth and in Wandsworth, everyone moved over to doing the strengthening, family strengthening communities and Solihull. So I don't know what kind of made it go out of fashion, but I know that CAMS have always wanted to keep the Incredible Years going, but the community doesn't like it very much. So I was just wondering the way of working.
I think that there's some misunderstandings about the behavioural emphasis of it, as you said, and what we've noticed is with the toddler and the tailored nature of the toddler and particularly the toddler, but the preschool group, where children tend to start got interested again in that, because it just feels more reflective of sort of what parents are asking for. But the strengthening families continue alongside, definitely.
Yeah, because those are the ones, I mean, certainly at the time in the children's services a decade ago, but it was the families that came out that they didn't like. It was quite hard to, with the kind of clinical governance, it was quite hard for them to re-implement that.
That's really interesting. It's making me think about how we brand it or name it as a group and what that means to different people.
The differences were really, because they're quite similar.
That's definitely worth thinking about in terms of implementation. Again, David and I are going to talk after this about the EIF report, but certainly this has got by far, I've written up here 14 RCTs, by far the strongest evidence base. The EPEC programme does have a really good evidence base and came out well in the EIF report as well. It's a peer support programme though, so it doesn't quite fit into the kind of CAMS model, but it's an interesting programme.
The videos with these models, are they
Better.
Maybe we need to do a bit of marketing work around updating it. So,
yeah, I think you might do actually, because I think certainly the parents that I work with struggle with the old videos. So I think if they have been updated, I think some statements about that might be quite important, but
Yeah. New and improved.
yeah.
Yeah, I think it has been changed.
Yeah.
There's always very few ethnic minorities and very few men. It was all
And all American.
and all American.
Which suits with our community, just didn't feel like there was a fit there.
No, that's right.
And also, we've run, I think, more over the last few years, all our groups are run, facilitated with family support workers from the children's centres. And I think there's been something about the ownership feeling shared and the impact on family support workers' own work with families individually afterwards that has been really enriched by running these sorts of groups. And I know we have one centre that I think still feels like we won't let the word Webster Stratton be mentioned either, but the rest, there's been a sea change with the others that really been open and interested to it.
And I think one of the problems is it would present a challenge to the current groups that are all running because we have group strategy, we have parenting group strategies for all these other groups that have been developed in Wandsworth, so the Solid House and play-based groups and Webster Stratton, I think positive parenting, all sorts of urgent space, but less rigorous than this, and so it present a challenge to all those groups that are currently running, which is a bit difficult in terms of the workforce.
Yeah. And I think in terms of, I think it's all our collective responsibility to educate commissioners and service managers in what we know really works, as well as collecting the practice-based evidence that, okay, it may work in 14 RCTs, but does it work in Wandsworth? And we need to collect that, and we need to also educate commissioners that you can't do a 6-week version of this. The evidence base is not that a 6-week version is half as good as a 30. You know, there is no evidence for a 6-week version. But I think there is another challenge in that for us to as a profession to say this is what we should be doing because this is what we know works. When something else comes along, fine, we have to change what we do. But I think that the drivers in the system are partly historical, but also about a need to get sort of throughput, and there's often a mismatch between quality and quantity. So it's a difficult position we're all in, but I think it is our collective responsibility to kind of share that to educate commissioners particularly.
Is there something about thresholds? I was just thinking about in sort of later on in CAMS that our community sort of early help teams run the sort of preventative groups, and they're much more flexible in the evidence-based approaches that they may be using, whereas for threshold into CAMS, the difficulties need to reach to such a sort of level that there needs to be presented difficulty, whereas a strengthening families program might be open to vulnerable mothers doing okay, but just needs a bit of support that wouldn't actually meet thresholds.
So what we'll talk about a little bit later in terms of the evidence base is the programmes that are targeted on a clinical presentation like child behaviour are much more effective than targeting, say, demographic, some kind of proxy for vulnerability. So that doesn't mean that they don't work, just our understanding of how that evidence is developed is much clearer for this. But this also sits better, as you say, in a CAMS setting. And I would see the Solihull approach being kind of pre-CAMS and pre what we're talking about here anyway. So it wouldn't necessarily have to be a conflict, but more part of the kind of tiered programme that we are kind of working into. So we really like these programmes to sit in a community so that you can, step people down, or if you're a Thrive landlord, then kind of be one or the other. Yeah. We don't want to be doing that.
And I think you can combine the Solihull with this because, in behaviour evidence, Solihull, you still need to do something. And actually, in terms of detail of what you do, and I think I agree with what you're saying, that in many ways it's quite systemic, Webster Stratton, if you use it sensitively and thoughtfully. So I think, in terms of when you get to the behaviour, the thing it really, really needs to change with the conduct. I think you can put it within the context of a Solihull sort of thinking about relationship making, which means that they're not incompatible. for me then, and certainly within Greenwich and our work with health visitors, we try to combine the two, but say that once you've done it, if the conduct's still there, you need to do something else, and so you move on.
And the UK RCTs are quite pragmatic, so they were done in community settings, one's in Wales, and there was one in South London. So I think they, as RCTs go, they weren't, very highly controlled and unrealistic. I think they were quite good, pragmatic RCTs. So I think some of this is quite applicable, and I've definitely got the message that we need to think about how we market this. And it's interesting that you were mentioning about children's centres, because there's quite a lot of people working directly in CAMS and kind of experienced therapists in the room. But we'd be really interested in CAMS that wanted to partner with a children's centre and send that person on this course as well. They would get the same funding as long as they were able to be supervised and supported by someone that was experienced, which is likely to be in the CAMS team, but not necessarily. Or health visitors. So if there are other partnerships that that you want to make aware of this, that you're working with at the moment, then it would be fantastic, I think, to kind of invite people to do the training together, of course. Okay, fine. So outcome measures. So we have made a decision within the curriculum around what outcome measures we're going to use. This is sort of, I would be interested in what comes out of our afternoon discussion, and where we, if we are able to pull together a paper, that would be deeply exciting for me, because this has been something I've been grappling with for a while. So they're not absolutely set in stone, but kind of at a point where we have to kind of, we're writing the training, so we can't change things too much. So this is what we've got. So all the things, I'm just getting this note, all the things that are kind of applicable across the board, so the kind of outcome rating scales, the goals-based outcomes, that stuff would still apply, the satisfaction stuff, the feedback stuff. For parental mental health, and Kessler 10 is actually in there. I did a review recently of parental mental health measures for under 5s, and this came out as one of 2 strongest measures, so that's very reassuring. Now for child behaviour, the SDQ has enough good data now for 18 months plus, so we're going to use that. The other one for the younger children, we were looking at the ages and stages questionnaire, socio-emotional. Does have a small cost attached. It's possible that we could try and negotiate that, because it's used by health visitors. And I think it's, with measures, what's quite nice is to talk the same language as the other teams around an area. And if not, the infant behaviour questionnaire in the short form is the kind of best alternative, in terms of, just to remind everyone that we're talking about things that are free. We're talking about things that are short and easy to use and been used in clinical practice. I noticed on here, the CBCL, the Child Behaviour Checklist, was written as a wish list one, and again, I'm just talking from, I've used that in quite a lot of research, and I feel like it's very long. I feel like for younger children, parents don't like it that much. They don't feel like it always applies, and it's so stringently licensed. Even how you analyse it is licensed, so it's so expensive. I just don't know how we would implement that. Really, it's prohibitively expensive. So, yes, I do think it would be good to get a better one for younger children, and as Duncan says, that hasn't happened, it's not going to happen imminently, so we're working with what we've got, and I do think the ages and stages, if we can manage to wangle that, would be a good one. So, in terms of the parent-infant relationships, what we've decided to do is an observational measure, so we will train people up in that measure as part of the training course. There is so much evidence now saying that parent report of this is quite unreliable, and an observational measure. So this is again something that is freely available. Obviously people need to train in it and become reliable in it, but is fairly short in terms of that training and reliability. There are some, obviously, like the care index and fantastic observational measures take a long time to code and a long time to train up in and be reliable in, and therefore aren't that pragmatic for a clinical setting. But I think this is part of the shift in really valuing this stuff as part of clinical practice.
Is there an age range on this?
Yes, so that will be part of the training, how you apply it to different kind of age groups, but we want to use it across. Yes.
And did you like the Massey one?
Pardon?
Did you like Massey with the pinned sensitivity index? There's another scale. Massey,
I don't know that we looked at that one. I think the biggest one used in clinical practice is KIPS. I don't know if anyone's using that, but again, there's a cost attached to it. And it is looking a bit more at parenting than it is on the interaction itself. But if you've got any info on that, please send it over. I think we're pretty set on that observational measure, just because I felt like we scoured premiums.
Can I just say something about this issue of cost? Because I think it's in terms of using the right tool clinically for you and the families that you're working with, you should use whatever tool best fits. And if there's a cost to it, that's perfectly fine. And if that's the best tool, then if you can negotiate with that service, then that's the tool that you should be using. The issue for cost nationally is about what's able to be built into the mental health services data set. Up until, well, in fact this week, it was that everything had to be free, or it could be licensed, but it had to be free to be used. That has now started to change. So we've been arguing for some years now that these are clinical tools in the same way that medication is a clinical tool. And nobody would say you could only prescribe medication if it's free. In the same way that I think we're starting to win the argument that you shouldn't just say the tools that can be collected are the ones that are free. So there has been negotiation around use of the SDQ, which has been successful. There was a big consultation exercise for which we haven't heard the results for the ORS and the SRS, which are heavily licensed and there is a cost to them. But it means that NHS Digital are now considering building in tools into the mental health services data set for which there is a cost. So about 6 months ago, this was dead in the water, but now if there's a tool which is good and there is a cost, we can start to make an argument if it's better than something that's free. And that's the first question NHS Digital asks is there a free equivalent? And if there is, then that's the one they're going to go with. If there isn't, then there's an argument for... So it's only at a national level where the cost is an issue in terms of building into the mental health services data set.
Yeah, I completely agree. As I said, my personal experience is the CBCR isn't that good as a clinical measure, and people might have different experiences. I do think one of the ones that is on the wish list here, the short form of the PSI, Parenting Stress Index, is one that I do think is pretty good actually, but it is at the moment an expensive one.
Can I just ask which one of those might be best for measuring parental reflective function?
Good question. So the sensitivity scales, basically, this idea of mentalisation, sensitivity, attunement, reflective functioning, I think is complex. I think how it relates to later attachment, which is why we devise these proxies, is complex. I am big fan of the meta-analysis that came out earlier in the year that looks at that intergenerational transmission of attachment. And what comes out quite strongly in that is that sensitivity doesn't explain everything, and that actually couple functioning and more cognitive domains. So parental reflective functioning is considered slightly more cognitive, like mindfulness. People have heard of that. The kind of Liz Mines stuff is more cognitive than sensitivity. But again, we have to make a decision about what we're measuring, and we can't suddenly be measuring all these things that we don't actually know enough about. We certainly can't be measuring, doing the strange situation in clinical practice. It may be that one day things change and it's very different, but the sensitivity scale is really what is capturing that.
Does does it have a subscale of reflective functioning?
Not specifically reflective functioning, but I guess it's how you would conceptualise the difference between mentalisation and reflective functioning and sensitivity. I think they are very slightly different, and there's certainly stuff within the sensitivity scales that looks at how a parent is able to hold that child in mind and think about it. Yeah, exactly. So that stuff is captured.
Is there additional training available?
Well, the training that we'll do so Anna Freud run training for the...
On the NIC?
Yes, and within the CYP IAPT 0 to 5's training, we'll train everybody up in this to be reliable. So it's going to be 3 days kind of split across, so people have time to practice and get reliable. So of course for CAMS you've got the C gas and the peer gas, which you've got here, I can see, and we're going to use, which is parent-infant relationships, and it's the kind of global assessment scale. We want to keep up the family context stuff like usual, and then we do want to add in a short measure of the couple relationship as well. Does anybody measure couple relationship or co-parenting at the moment? I think we're learning so much more, particularly in the early years, about how couple distress and instability can relate to child outcomes, that it's becoming so important to kind of capture that.
Is that the measure you're considering?
Yeah. Any other measures people have ideas about?
No, I was just going to say, if people want to see about how to score 15, just go onto the Associated Family Therapy website. There's an awful lot of stuff on there that show you how to score those days.
I think some undefined services are using things like PHQ-9 and GAD, because actually they find that parental depression and anxiety goes down with undefined work.
Mm-hmm.
But do you feel that what's your view?
So I guess we're using the Kessler-10 for that, and that was really to be able to capture as a global scale of parental mental health. So anxiety and depression are within that. They're not specifically focusing on those, but they also have some trauma symptoms and general distress. So I think if people were measuring PHQ and GAD on top of that, then that would only be a good thing. I think we have to be slightly mindful about how many measures we give people.
But would the trainees all be doing the core skills modules, so they'd get the overview of all the measures anyway?
Well, now core skills has been slightly adapted. We can kind of make, it's not going to be quite in the same way. Although I think, in fact, at least 2 of those trainings are still in, so it's possible that they would get some of that. But I'm not sure, are PHQ and GAD part of the...
On the MHSDS.
Yeah.
I haven't seen the SDQ going down to 18 months. Is that new?
I guess, so they did a big study in Scotland a couple of years ago. The ViPP co-parenting trial has used it from 18 months and published some research on that in London.
It's a different question.
No.
But actually, on the website though, it does say from 2 on the SDQ website.
Yeah.
I do think there is enough.
So it's using the 2 to 4.
I think what will end up. Pardon?
So do you mean using the 2 to 4 scale with 18 to 24 months?
Yeah. Happy to be wrong about that? I think it's an issue. Babies change so much so quickly. It is an issue, and perhaps the ages and stages.
I was just going to ask if Robert Goodman knows, because we got into this to bother with him about using it below the age under 2.
So we did it in collaboration with him, that work, and
That's
published
fine.
it with him. So, be in the know.
You can present yourself if you don't.
Yeah.
When I looked at the ages and stages before, they seem to have quite small age brackets, and it seemed, but I'm not sure, that the scores weren't standardised across the different questionnaires so that you can look at outcome changes?
They're not the easiest to interpret, so they are kind of in. Does anybody use them at the moment? The socio-emotional items stages. So they are. Perhaps we can come back to this. I'll finish this off and we'll have a whole measures chat this afternoon. I didn't mean to distract you too much.
No, this is fantastic. This is doing some of the work for the afternoon, so this is great.
Okay. So they are kind of in 6-month brackets, but then they include kind of 3 months either side. So it is a little bit complex, but we would try to support all our trainees to interpret some of that stuff and to interpret the norms kind of accordingly. But it has been done. But I understand the confusion. So, who might be suitable to apply? So, as I said, really interested in broadening that out beyond kind of standard CAMS team who's working in early years and got some mental health experience. And for people that are perhaps not listed here, people can email me and ask questions. We're kind of interested in a whole range of professions really, as long as that they have experience in delivering clinical work with families and have a kind of good 2-year solid experience working with mental health. I think I put in infant mental health practitioner and this one came up. I mean, it's just focused on. I'm not sure if she did amongst So, as well as the specific experience of practitioners, there's also something to think about in terms of the service being kind of ready. There is some brochures that Natasha's kind of, maybe Charlotte has printed around the place, which has some of these details on. So this has some information on the course, kind of an overview, but also what the entry requirements are and some of the things for services to consider. So the other things to think about, other than the kind of support for the video feedback, how you would, the materials that you would need, is obviously the kind of buy-in from your service and finding a suitable supervisor. You'll get the specialist ViPP supervision and the specialist incredible year supervision from course staff, but you would obviously want just your general supervision for this course and the clinical caseload you've got associated with the course in your teams as well. So that supervision is important, and particularly if you're partnering with somebody outside of your CAMS service, so a health visitor or a children's centre worker, thinking that through with them. And I think what we've got here is quite a lot of people that are working in established infant mental health teams, but in addition, if it was a CAMS service that perhaps hadn't done this so much, just having those care pathways in place, ensuring that they're getting referrals through, because there's nothing worse than trainees struggling to pick up cases relevant that they're able to fit into use for their assessments and things like this. And then of course what we've mentioned, the 2 practitioners for the IY groups. Yeah, I think that's most of the stuff. I did have a look at the checklist.
Do you have equivalent training for supervisors like that with other IAPT programs?
Well, we have our supervisor manager training. It's not specific. None of them are specific to modalities, are they?
It's both. There's generic training, and then the tutor groups are modality specific. For this, because of the time scale, so the supervisor's training starts in November. We're trying to get, and technically we haven't even got the commission for this yet, but we know we are, so we're going full steam ahead with it. But the way it's worked is that actually it might be, it's going to be very tight, let's put it that way, to get people in to do the supervision on the course that's already running. So one of the things that we're thinking about is whether we have so people can get in and do the supervisor's course, and if there are enough people who want to supervise this, then we will find a course tutor to offer the modality-specific piece of work. But the other thing we're thinking of, because of the timescales, is that we might have an additional kind of supervisory top-up which might run in, I don't know, early next year sometime. So for people who are supervising people who are doing the course, they need to understand two things. One is they need to understand the sort of IAPT way of supervising, as well as understanding the kind of content of the course and be linked in with it in some way. So we've got both trains running at the moment.
So you've got supervisors identified already for that, for no longer training?
To deliver the modular specifically?
To be trained as supervisors?
No, not yet. No.
But the parenting supervisor course would be good for this, for the DIY then. It's already established, isn't it? So people could apply for that one. So it would fit with the...
Well, they could apply for the supervisor's course in under fives. It's just that we don't know whether there will be enough people who apply to have a particular cohort. But there may well be. If there is, it will go ahead. If not, then we'll have this top up. We may do both, but this is still work in progress. There are you gather there are questions that we can answer really clearly, and others that are still work in progress. But
I mean, there's still another 2 weeks before the kind of applying to be students on the course finishes as well, and I imagine people would marry that up. Who's training in their service with who's supervising, so it's kind of would come together.
The supervisor's training is a generic training starting in November for IAPT, but you're suggesting that if there's enough sort of people interested in the under fives bit, that you could start the supervisor training for specifically under fives in November.
So the current supervisor training for IAPT, for the current 4 curricula, so there's a generic supervisors training, which is the sort of teaching bit in the morning, and then roughly splits into the afternoon. People go into their modularized. So if you're a CBT supervisor, you go with your CBT cohort and get input from a CBT specialist. If people do this course, they'll get the generic supervisor's input, and in the afternoon they'll go with a under 5 specialist for sort of specialist under 5s supervision.
And information about that is
available through the website. So we will put up a slide with the website on and contact details, and I'll say a little bit in a minute about how to register interest and what the routes are into this training as well. There are 2 routes which I'll share, but basically. What I'll talk about next is about the kind of routes into the training, because again, there are other developments that happen really quickly around this. So quickly that I'm not sure we have this slide, but so if you are interested in the training, so this is going back to the training now, this is our website. In fact, if you're interested in the job, this is also on the website. So if you're interested in training on the website, the training on the job, the website is the go-to place. This gets updated very regularly by Natasha and Charlotte. So in terms of if you're interested in the training, the first thing to do is to register an expression of interest. So will we send around links as well to expression of interest, or is it just going to the website?
It's on that page, but I'll send it.
Fine. So if you go to the website, look for the postgraduate training bit, the drop-down menu on there is how to express an interest in this or any of the other trainings. The reason we ask you to express an interest is twofold. One is that this is developing very quickly, and the people who express an interest will get all the information as soon as it's updated. You're not making any commitment at this stage, you're just saying, I might be vaguely interested in this and I'd just like to be kept up to date. You'll also be sent through that expression of interest the appropriate application form to complete. So you'll get up-to-date information, you'll be sent the application form, and as things continue to update, you'll be sent more information. So it's really helpful if you do that. The deadline for applying is the 14th of October, so that's not very long. And it'll be on a first-come, first-served basis. So as soon as we've got enough, on the 14th of October, we will look at the applications that have come in, or the people who will be running the course will have a look, and they will decide who's appropriate, and then the offers will go out.
Probably do a telephone.
Okay, right. So there'll be a process for making sure that I think it's more about making sure that things are in place in order to
Absolutely.
do the. So have you got supervision? Do you have the video equipment? Are you able to do all that kind of stuff? So there will be a process, but that will be done on a first come first served basis.
Is there any money available for services that don't provide video equipment?
No, there was in the past. Is the early setup of IAPT, but not anymore. You might want to speak to your local CCG and say this is a bit of kit that we need to do this. There are CCGs who are underspent. Now's a good time to ask for equipment, but so you might be in luck, but there's no money coming centrally now for equipment. In terms of routes into the training, so one is the kind of what's become known as the traditional method. So IAPT was about upskilling existing staff. So if you are someone working in an under 5 service, then you can apply, and if you're successful, all your course fees will be paid and there will be salary support. The new method is what's become known as recruit to train. So there are the two things going on with IAPT now. One is upskilling the workforce, and the other bit is expanding it. And recruit to train is one way of expanding the workforce. So within your organisation, what you are now able to do is to recruit someone in specifically to do this training. And their half-time salary will be paid completely. So they'll be paid at a half-time basis, plus all their course fees, for the 2 years that they're running the course. So these are additional staff. You need to prove to us that these are additional staff, not that we've got rid of someone and we're going to recruit them through this for 2 years and then we're going to give them a permanent job. There has to be evidence that this is new staff coming into your service. Where you get them from, that's less of an interest to us, but they have to be new to your service. So there is some information on the website. This is a new development, so this is from Tuesday, this development. We piloted it last year, and what we learned from last year is that what we would do is do it much earlier, but we're actually doing it later because the money's only just been released. But this is an option. So if you're a service lead and you're interested in expanding your workforce, the recruit to train route is a helpful one to go down. But the offer's there. If you want to take it up, the offer is there. Health Education England and NHS would love it if people took it up, because they have their own target of expanding the workforce by 1,700 new therapists.
It's quite ambitious.
It's very ambitious.
But I think it's fair to say that, so we did it last year, and the applicants completely get it. The information's all there. It's quite straightforward. It is complicated because it depends on your HR service as well, how quick they are. But it worked really well for us, and actually the staff that we had as trainees are pretty much all in post. It's been a real asset to the trust.
And they've tended, so there is always a degree of dropout in courses, but the ones who come through the recruit to train, there's less dropout from recruit to train than for the other courses. It's partly because that's their job. So if you're not doing the course, you're not doing your job, and well, that's raised all sorts of questions. But we piloted it here last year, and the process is quick, but it works.
Is there an idea that everyone in the end that's working in under 5s would have done this training by NHS? No, there isn't a sort of an exclusivity around the kind of long-term nature of
No. This is it's seen as a helpful offer, and so what comes through IAPT and through HEE, but there's also an expectation that CCG, as part of the local transformation plans, will also put funding forward as will provider organisations to do other bits of training. So there's no idea, no sort of pretense that the only training you need comes through IAPT and everyone needs to be trained in it. It's that it's one of a suite of offers which will help upskill the workforce.
And is it offered every year? Or is it offered every 2 years?
Well, it we offered this year, because HE is funded year on year.
Okay.
So we can say, this is the offer this year,
Okay.
it's salary supported, all course fees are paid. Whether next year we suspect that the salary support will reduce, if not go completely. Whether the year after that, so do the course fees. So it's a kind of a get them while they're hot. It's
We're planning to deliver it next year in terms of our thinking.
the course will definitely be delivered. It's about the support around it, whether that's still there. So there's no question the courses will continue.
Yeah.
It's whether their salary support and the course fees are paid for. That's the bit where there are big questions.
And if you do the course, does that mean there isn't any time really to do any other cases apart from the cases that are linked with the highway and it?
So if you remember, it was right at the beginning, like my first slide. So it's a day for teaching in term time and then a day for clinical, ring-fence clinical practice for this.
So the other
So depending on what time they have in the service, there will be other days to do their work. And that part-time change was made specifically so people had that diversity in their workload.